give us a sense of what you know in terms of the Democratic side, right? Because there's there over the past week or so, there became more reason to sort of like see that there was sort of like a dual track type of thing that was going on. One was get Biden to step aside. And the other was this question of like, how do you bypass Harris, or do you bypass Harris, and who was sort of lining up on that and who wasn't?
Yeah. The bypass Harris stuff was very funny, and that was some of the best stuff we had at Semaphore, were Democratic professionals, just people involved in the party. James Carville's the most famous, but then on down, just coming up with these weird Willy Wonka factory tests for how you would pick a new nominee, and none of them had any basis in what the party had ever done. It was just the closest comparison to this is 1968, which Democrats hate to think about, where LBJ drops out, but then also RFK is assassinated with a bunch of delegates for the convention, and they're released. But totally different system. Most states didn't have primaries like we know them at the time. So
yeah, I just want to stop one there, so the people don't know this. In 1968, there was maybe a dozen and a half primaries, period. Like, people don't understand that the primary system as we know it today, which is far more democratic, small d, democratic, was instituted after a commission that McGovern chaired, and I can't remember who else it was. So we didn't really get that until like 1972, which was in part of McGovern. Like, the union bosses were becoming too strong, I think, for some in the Democratic Party at that time, and it was all backroom deals for the most part.
Yeah, if you lived in Minnesota or Texas or New York or Virginia, like, there are most states you didn't have a primary, so it was much more, well, we assume the party bosses are going to get in a room and figure something out, and we'd like there to be a vote of confidence in our nominee. It was actually Gene McCarthy who went to the convention having won the most primaries, but he only won 6 primaries, so nobody cared. Nobody. But to zoom that forward to 2024, all these strategists saying there has to be some other way. They were operating, every time I say the word context, I now think of Kamala's voice, but they were operating in the context of, well, it's been 50 years of normal primaries, and it feels anti-democratic to not have some sort of vote or something. And an undercurrent of that was also, the party has a bunch of talent now, which you didn't have in 2016. And wouldn't it be great if we had some new Democrat to roll out, and not the vice president whose approval rating is like 40%. Those are the thoughts. That all faded over, just hours on Sunday. I was calling around Sunday, but I'm calling somebody, and before I get to them, they put out a statement. And you could do the tea leaf reading of how Obama didn't say, here's my endorsement of Harris. He just said we're moving forward. Some Democrats went out their way to not endorse Harris, like some Senate candidates, especially, didn't say Harris right away because they are worried about that. It's not just that she's unpopular; they're worried about, well, I'm going to have to answer a question now about some position she took on immigration that I didn't have to answer before, and it's kind of awkward. But most of them are just stampeding towards Harris. Like, most of the elected Democrats, and again, it's because of this primary thing. It was the chairman of the Minnesota DFL. His take on it was, there was a primary and 50 million Democrats voted for a Biden-Harris ticket, and that's spin, but that's not crazy. Most people who voted for Joe Biden have thought, okay, well, who's his running mate? Let me conceive of her as president. It would have been just way less democratic if we said, well, no one has democratic legitimacy. We're just going to have a couple of debates on TV and say that person's the nominee.
And let a panel of 3 celebrity judges decide who wins or something. It's just absolutely bizarre.
They didn't know. They didn't have a plan. They just said, oh, wouldn't it be great if we got a total fresh start and not Harris? And for most elected Democrats, you can't do that. You can't go back home and say, yes, I threw both Biden and the vice president under the bus for this governor that you've never heard of. That was the choice, and they just didn't make that choice. I haven't seen any Democrat. I haven't seen any Democrat come out and say, I choose a different candidate for president, or I want one. Just Harris or TBD.
Well, it also doesn't seem like there are any. It seems like, all of these other candidates sort of like realized this is where the critical mass is. I mean, there was, I think it was on Saturday or Friday. There was a piece. I don't know if it was in the Times. I don't know if you remember this one, Emma, but like where someone said, I don't care. Let's just, forget the mini primary. Just go with Kamala because we got to get this done with. And was there a sense? I mean, have you heard anything? It feels like everything was so tight-lipped. I don't think anybody, even in the Harris camp, was aware of anything until Saturday. Was Saturday morning or Saturday either. That's my sense, anyways. That where Biden stood on this, like, was he? How much? Was he ever entertaining this idea of a mini primary, or was it like, no, I picked her to be VP. I can't, it's a poor reflection on me if I say now that because theoretically she's a heartbeat away from the presidency, right? I mean, if he was already the nominee and he decided I can't do this anymore, wouldn't she have automatically been the nominee? If he had been
she would have been. Well, if he had like died from COVID, frankly, she would have been president. Yeah. So that's the thing. Just people had already gone through the process of imagining what President Kamala Harris would be like to some extent. I know the only thing we know that Biden worried that she was not electable on her own, but not that he said, what's our plan B? He didn't really consider that. It was very important to him that he had won the primary. And as far as I know, and I don't know everything that happened in the room with Biden and his top 4 staffers, but they never said what's a great plan B to save the party. It was more, can I run or do I have to hand it to my vice president?
Okay.
Yeah, and I would also say her approval rating right now is very much tied to the general disapproval of Biden. That's going to be an issue that she does run into, but there's also, because the disapproval of Biden is so tied to his age, him saying I'm stepping aside, and the overwhelming kind of talking point is that this is patriotism. I think it alleviates a lot of that pressure for her, and especially because the Republicans, they're going with that this is just like January 6th. This is Kamala's coup of Biden as he voluntarily steps aside. They've got nothing. They've got nothing. Is my as of right now. They're making fun of her laugh or something like that. They'll find something. I mean, he stuck her with immigration, which felt like
but he didn't. He stuck her with negotiating with Mexico and Guatemala and Nicaragua, and that, I mean, it's not a policy that I like, but it worked out the way they wanted it to. It sure seems.
I noticed today that Ted Cruz said that she was the border czar, and he said that's not my term, that's Joe Biden's term, and it's not Joe Biden's term. It was this. There's this thing in the press that we've done for 15 years where everyone who gets a job we call him a czar. So she kind of got handed that by.
But he's going back for one. That's a deep cut from the Obama years too. I mean,
yes, where everyone who had a job was a czar. Yeah.
But that was when the Republicans were anti-Russia, and so they were worried about the czars at that time. I mean, it's confusing. But I just want to note, like,
sure.
I think Emma's got a very good point, which I hadn't really contemplated at all. The love that is now being espoused for Joe Biden in the press. I mean, it almost makes you blush a little bit. Like, it's a little bit embarrassing, but they're like, they're talking to him about him now, like, in a way that Democrats rarely talk about their presidents, where they're going to put him on Mount Rushmore. That's got to end up only benefiting. If it does anything, it's only going to benefit Harris at that point, right? I would imagine. Right? I mean, they're talking about him like if Joe Biden put himself in his aspirations in front of, or put the country ahead of him, maybe it starts a different narrative. I don't know. I mean, but it's definitely not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt her. That's for sure.
They're trying to contrast it with Trump, who's clearly me. I think that's an effective contrast again, but you know how I stand, where I stand.
Yeah. I mean, they're both literally the party line around this. And this would have happened a year ago had Biden done this. Is, can you believe the selflessness of doing this, of being able to win the presidency again and passing up for the good of the country, that they will do that. I mean, there's going to be a Joe Biden tribute video at the DNC. There's going to be a Joe Biden Presidential Museum. There always was.
It's not just Democrats who are doing it. It's like it's all the centrist opiners and like the whole body politic it seems like is doing that, but who knows how that impacts people. But all right, let me ask you this. Have you heard anything in terms of Kennedy?
No. So Kennedy spoke yesterday. He was in Massachusetts and gave a press conference, and it was kind of the voices that keep ringing in my head, because I'm old millennial, are the nihilists from The Big Lebowski. It's not fair. Her girlfriend cut off a toe. It was that sort of tone where it just was unfair in his view that Democrats, the DNC structured the primary so that it was hard for Biden to lose, where South Carolina was going first. And had they just not messed with the primary, maybe he could have won the primary against Joe Biden, but it's too late for that. And now his line has been, what they're doing is anti-democratic. He compared it, not the press conference, I think on Fox, to how Russia chooses its leaders. But he's just annoyed that this happened, because a lot of his rationale was that I'm running against two old men, and he was saying for months that Biden it was irresponsible to run him. He's too mentally weak to run for president, and now he's running against somebody who I assume he voted for, because he was living in California, and I don't think he was not voting Democratic in 2016. Now he has to argue that, well, this is unfair. And yeah, he's somebody who got a little bit screwed by this. I don't know to the extent Cornel West and Jill Stein are, but there was a lot of a vote out there, a lot of votes for just, I don't like the fact that I'm choosing between these two old guys again. And he's the most directly impacted by that. So back when Haley was in the race, Fox News did polling on how voters would go if it was Haley and not Trump versus Biden. And RFK did very well. There were a lot of voters who were MAGA voters who were furious, and they would have voted for Kennedy. I've never seen, the only polling I've seen with Harris in the race and not Biden recently was Atlanta Journal-Constitution, where it's I think a 5-point Trump lead, and Kennedy's just not relevant. So I don't think he's going to be super relevant this context.
Well, yeah. I mean, my sense is that he will bleed a little bit of Democratic support, maybe not a lot, but a little bit, which means that the net that he takes is going to be more from Trump. Yeah. And it's also hard to disaggregate this from that tape that came out. I'm curious, because this get barely reported, but it was his son that leaked the tape.
Yes.
And
who was angry that Trump didn't pick him for VP. That was what he said in the Post. Well, he said that Trump had a chance to choose a vice president that would have unified the country, and instead he went with, he said some pro-vaccine insult about J.D. Vance that was actually, I follow this closely and I don't know what he was talking about.
His son did that?
Yeah, Bobby the Third.
I didn't see
deleted
that
right away. Yeah.
Oh, I thought Bobby, because the tweet that I saw from Bobby Jr. was, or the third was, this is a conversation that needs to be made public. I didn't realize the other parts that were going on there. Oh, that's fascinating. So he was mad at Trump.
Yes, he was mad at Trump because, and this is, I think it was Eric Weinstein, one of the Weinstein brothers, the guys who were just on every podcast all the time talking about the establishment. We're like, how come the establishment doesn't want Tulsi Gabbard or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. do this? And Snowden, who I think people have more respect for, said, why Kennedy's just sitting right there. The reason, there's lots of reasons. One reason Democrats don't trust Kennedy and Gabbard, because they keep changing their position and saying they'd work for Trump. And Kennedy did leave open. So he said, if I was the Democrats, I would talk to me. If I was a Democratic elder or statesman, I would talk to me and see if I want to run, but I'm not running right now. And that's just not going to happen, because he's much more simpatico with Trump, and he keeps hinting that he'd be willing to join a Trump administration. I was talking yesterday to before, so he gave us, I think it was 5:15 was Kennedy, East Coast, and at like 5:03, I was talking to Trump people who were hoping that Kennedy might drop out and endorse Trump, because they really think he's in that mindset.
I wonder if he is, to some extent, but
He definitely more than endorsing the Democrats. He said he had a respect for Biden, but he is treating this like cheating, basically. What happened yesterday?
Crazy. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.